Before we begin, I would like to open with a word from Scripture and then prayer. And after that, I will introduce Brett, and we will get on with the evening. From Psalm 53, "The fool says in his heart, 'There is no God.' They are corrupt, and their ways are vile. There is no one who does good. God looks down from heaven on the sons of men to see if there are any who understand, any who seek God. Everyone has turned away. They have together become corrupt. There is no one who does good, not even one. Will the evildoers never learn? Those who devour my people as men eat bread, and who do not call on God? There they were, overwhelmed with dread, where there was nothing to dread. God scattered the bones of those who attacked you. You put them to shame, for God despised them. Oh, that salvation for Israel would come out of Zion. When God restores the fortunes of his people, let Jacob rejoice, and Israel be glad." Shall I lead you in prayer? Our Father in heaven, we thank you for bringing us here safely tonight. And we come before you this evening to ask for a blessing on this presentation. We ask that you give Brett the strength and the guidance of your Spirit as he speaks to us tonight. Help us keep an open mind while holding fast to your word, and keep us in your care this evening. All this we pray in your Son's name, Jesus Christ. Amen. Just a little bit about Brett. I just pulled this right off his webpage. So Brett Ullman, he travels North America, speaking to the teens, young adults, leaders, and parents on topics including parenting, mental health, men, sexuality, pornography, dating, and media. Brett's seminars engage and challenge attendees to try and connect our faith with our modern culture. Participants are inspired to reflect on what we know, what we believe, and how our faith ought to serve as the lens through which we view and engage tough conversations in our society today. Husband to Dawn and father of Bennett and Zoe, Brett and his family make their home in Ajax, Ontario, where Brett leads and directs Worlds Apart, a charity focused on empowering individuals to realign their lives with biblical core values, often muddled by media but central to Christian living. Brett was a teacher with the Toronto District School Board for 10 years before moving into speaking full-time in 2005. He has a master's degree in evangelism and leadership from Wheaton Graduate School in Chicago and is also a graduate of the Arrow Leadership Program. Brett is currently working on his master's in counseling psychology from Yorkville University. And him and his family attend Sanctus Church in Ajax since 2004. With that being said, I would like to welcome Brett Ullman to the stage.
Something that every speaker says when they ever come is like, "I'm really glad to be here." As a full-time speaker who speaks to large groups for a living, with COVID, I'm really glad to be here. This is my first tour in 2 years, so it's nice to be here. I'm sitting down. I'll explain why in a second, but if you can't see me, feel free just to shift. I'm not moving. I'll be here the entire night. I'm going to assume most of you don't know me. Let me give you 2 minutes on me, and we'll get going. You kind of heard a bit of my background. I was a teacher for 10 years. I taught a whole range of classes, but mostly I spent my time teaching Rotary Science to grades 7s and 8s. And I left that 16 years ago to do this, and this is actually my full-time job. I travel and speak. I did way too much Zoom and other things in the last few years, but it's good to be back in front of people. I'm actually on a week-long tour right now. I was in Calgary yesterday. It was an absolutely horrible drive getting here today. It took me 6.5 hours. It was fine from Red Deer on, but it was like the ice on the highway with the overturned cars, which were kind of the disturbing thing as you're driving here. And then I'm actually doing a few other schools, and then Red Deer and back in Calgary. I speak on issues that I think we sometimes either don't want to talk about, don't like to talk about, or we don't even know how to talk about. Let's put it in that way. So parenting tonight, my other largest talk I do speak on is mental health, which is actually why I'm sitting. I was speaking way too much while I was doing my master's in Chicago and ended up having a breakdown afterwards. So nervous breakdown is not really a medical term, but I ended up spending a year of my life at home, which is ironic as I'm a speaker who speaks on mental health to begin with. And I ended up having a year at home, panic attacks, anxiety, depression, and that was 10 years ago. And I had 3 panic attacks last week. And so I'm still on an interesting journey and still trying to understand and figure out my body with many other doctors and specialists. But what I've learned is, for me, I know we're not Catholic, but Pope Francis once said, recovery is making a life despite limitations. And I've learned for me, if I sit in a chair with arms, my body's a little calmer. I don't fully get it, but it works for me. So it's one of those things that I'm doing. So tonight we're going to talk about parenting. And I'm just going to be upfront that my goal is to equip you and to empower you to be a better parent from wherever you're at to look at moving forward. And I hope that this kind of sparks conversation amongst you as people, as families, as churches, small groups, the list goes on, that this becomes the normal rhythm of life. I think talking about these things are very, very important. And I hope that the strength of the talk tonight is in its common sense and in its simplicity. I am married with 2 kids. My wife's name is Dawn. We're having our 25th anniversary this summer. My daughter's name is Zoe. Zoe is in second-year university, and my son Ben is in first-year university. So we are that unique age group of parents who had no kids in the house for many months, and now suddenly, as of last Friday, they're both back in the house. And they were arguing within 10 minutes of them being home, which is kind of an amusing thing. Some ground rules as we begin. Please be a good learner. What I mean by that is I think sometimes as Christians we're wonderful listeners. We listen, we smile, we nod, we say amen, but we're not always great learners, meaning if I said to you, what did you learn from the last sermon you heard, from the last person who taught you something? What did you take into your life, your faith, your parenting, your marriage, your whatever? You can take notes if you'd like. You can take pictures of any slide that you want. You can find your light bulbs because each of you are different. You are different as parents and you have different kids. So everything is not just you take exactly what I say to your family. Have opinions. Now this might sound weird, but I would rather you have a different opinion than me than have no opinion at all. When the Bible says iron sharpens iron, I think of that as like good, well thought out opinions, right? It's thinking through and having discourse. And I just say you can do this. We can be better parents, right? We can always improve in every aspect of our lives, no matter if it's our faith, our parenting, our marriages, our relationships. There is no cookbook approaches tonight. There's no poor theology. There's no platitudes or like, here's the 3 C's of parenting. And I would just say no shame and no condemnation. If I say something tonight and you're like, oh, I did that, please look at it. I love the quote from Maya Angelou. Do the best you can until you know better, and when we know better, we do better. I love that. So please don't take anything as shame and condemnation. So first, how did I get to a talk called Navigating Everything? Now, the truth is, it was actually called Everything to begin with. It was very ambitious to have a talk called Everything. But it really came down to one conversation I had after one talk. I finished speaking on mental health, and up came a father to my booth like I have tonight, and he said, Brett, can I ask you a question? And I'm like, sure. And he said, so I have a 16-year-old daughter. How do I talk to her about sex? What a great question. I mean, even for someone to ask that, I'm like, I love it. And I went to answer, but before I could answer, he interrupts me and says, oh, wait, by the way, she hates me. Go ahead. And I said, what do you mean she hates you? He said, oh, forget about that. How do I talk to her about sex? And I'm like, forget about sex. What do you mean she hates you? Because that's everything. If your daughter hates you, you probably are not speaking truth into her life. You don't have that relationship to do it. And as I was driving home, I realized that I speak to parents on topics, but I have no conversation on the act of parenting itself. And so I began to do what I do. I'm a researcher. I love to research. I'm actually a year into a research kind of for a new talk. Tomorrow at the school, I'll be talking to kids on media, and I'm looking to do a new conversation on that. So I read, and I read, and I read, and I was overwhelmed with parenting books. There are 75,000 with 10 new books coming online every single day. So many ideologies, so many thoughts, so many things that were just different. Now, before we even get into parenting, I just want to address one thing, which is called stock family syndrome. Think of stock photos you'd get online. There's a quote from the authors Reggie Joiner and Carrie Nieuwhof who say this, perfect pictures paralyze parents. I don't like alliteration, but you understand what I mean by that. Like, look at these families. Like, the 4 people here all smiling, they're hugging. Like, this has never happened in your house. Like, this is not how we live. These, like, the ladies are wearing hats. Everyone's holding hands as they walk into the forest. Like, is that your family earlier today? Notice everyone is 2 parents and 2 children, right? So if you're not that, we look at this like for some reason this is the ideal. It's not. Where are the people with, they were 2 families with 5 kids over our dinner today. Like, where are the people who don't look like this? We're not even addressing disabilities, mental health struggles, and so many other things. Single moms and single dads. There are extraordinarily more single moms and single dads. Another conversation for another day. Grandparents raising children is now statistically significant. It's now 1 to 3% of all Canadian children being raised by grandparents. I'm at a talk, a grandfather walks up to me, 75. He says, hey, he says, funny you mentioned that, I'm raising my 3 teenage granddaughters. His daughter and his son-in-law, drug addicts, have now just given up responsibility for the children. He doesn't even know where they are. He said, can I ask you a question about media? I'm like, sure. He says, what is this thing called Snapchat? Even the way he said it, I'm like, it's 1 word, by the way, it's not 2. But I'm 50, and I know there's a difference between me and my children. Picture being 75 and having 18-year-olds in the house. Now, the world our kids are growing up in today is different than you and me. And if you're a different age, a bit older than me, but younger than me, it used to be that a generation was, 10, 15 years, right? I could be in kindergarten and someone used to be in grade 13 way back in the day. We would all be part of a generation. Today, they say that a grade 9 looks at a grade 12 and says, who are you? There's just so much change. So this, on top, is my family. Grades 1 through grade 12. This is on top when my kids experienced things. Now, technology shifted when my daughter was in grade 1. That's when the iPhone 1 came out. Do you remember that? It was just called the iPhone. It changed a lot of things. In grade 1, my daughter's best friend's parents got divorced. And trying to explain that to a grade 1 is really hard. And every time I would leave to speak, my little girl would say, Daddy, are you coming home? And I would say, of course, I'm just going to Alberta for a little while. I'll be back. And she'd say, but so-and-so's mommy didn't come home. And how do you have a conversation like that? In grade 2, my daughter, one Sunday afternoon, was just at a friend's house from church playing on a trampoline. And I came over, and the mom began to cry. She said, I don't know why, but they're all talking about self-harm. 3 grade 2s. One of the girl's older sisters, teenager, struggled with self-harm. And I had my first conversation with these 3 girls in grade 2. In grade 3, my son saw his first pornographic image on my computer. I'm the one who comes to try to help you not have that happen, as a side note. But it's not if you see pornography these days, it's when. This is Canadian average. If not, it's a little bit high. This isn't someone searching out pornography, which, as a side note, which is what many Christian kids do, because sometimes we don't talk about sex, so they Google what things might mean, which we don't want, as a side note. Music, my daughter came home in grade 4, said, can I buy a song? I remember I said, honey, who? What artist? And she said, I don't remember his full name, but the first part of his name is the word little. And I said, honey, I don't know if any littles will be coming into our house. Dating began in grade 5. Can we just agree as a room full of people, dating in grade 5 is the dumbest thing ever and just move on from that? Here's what's funny. When I say that, I said it at the Christian school the other day, everyone claps. And I'm like, but many of you are dating in grade 5. But we date in grade 5, as a side note, usually because parents push our kids to date, not because kids want to date. Social media begins kind of around that time, and then drugs are found in my kids' school every year onward. On the bottom, up till grade 7, are my best friends' kids. Kids who are bullied so much they won't go to school in grade 1. Anxiety. I'm a 50-year-old, and I know I really struggle some days. I look at a teenager, and my heart goes out to them. And I look at a grade 2. How do you even comprehend what's going on? Eating disorders in grade 3, depression in grade 4, suicide in grade 5. I have now been invited to elementary schools every year for the past 20 years for a suicide. Last year was at least 3. In 2022, I'm at least 2 so far. And I get these calls from principals. They're like, what are you doing tomorrow? Just so you know, we didn't plan this yesterday, right? These are things that are well thought out and planned. And when someone says, what are you doing tomorrow? I know something happened. And I'm always like, what happened? They're like, we had a grade 5 kid take his life last night, and we don't know what to do. Sexting in grade 6. So sexting, if you don't know the term, I hope you do, where someone sends, usually a girl sending to a guy who's usually asking a topless naked photo, whatever it might be. Now, here's what's interesting about that statistic is that from what we see, there's no difference between Christian kids and non-Christian kids. When you meet the creator of the universe, there should be some change. Like as Christians, we do life differently. And if we don't do life differently, I begin to question sometimes what we claim. Then we hit middle school. And that should give you pause. Then we hit middle school. These are topics we used to have in university, college age. Then they came down to high school. Now we're addressing them at younger and younger ages. Peer pressure, self-esteem, alcohol use, phone addiction, and peer attachment, which we'll come back to. Then we hit high school, alcohol and drug abuse. The depressed girl and the adrift boy. Now, those are heavy generalizations. They come from an author named Leonard Sachs, but I actually would agree. It's been the last 5 years I've seen an incredible shift amongst parents who talk about their adrift sons. The purposeless 20-year-old guy. It's fascinating how much conversation. There's books written about that. Boys Adrift by Leonard Sachs, Boy Crisis. There just seems to be an issue happening today. Busyness, the desperation for peer acceptance, and extreme stress. Are you prepared as a parent to help equip your kids? Are our kids prepared tomorrow for what they will deal with in life, wherever they might be? And many of these things are new changes to our societies as well. So I acknowledge that I'm a topical speaker and that I address a lot of different topical things, but this conversation is a little different tonight. It's topical, but it's kind of foundational. Now, I would say in every aspect of all these topics, these are not hopeless. There are good kids doing good things. Everything is not bad. Like, this is not a fear, like sky is falling kind of conversation. So I want to walk through tonight the 4 foundations of parenting. Now, this is not like there's only 4, these are the 4, and I have a book with 4 foundations. That's not what I'm saying. It's when I read, I don't remember, it was 150 or more books over a couple of years. Don't forget, it's my job, right? I read sometimes for 8 hours in a day. But I said to my wife as we were kind of going through these conversations, what are we as parents, what are things that no one's ever spoken about in our entire life that we wish we knew? And we're kind of like, what is parenting? If you don't know what it is, how do you do it? Time. How do we spend time together? Do you know that I read a statistic that the average North American father spends 8 minutes of uninterrupted time with their children from Monday through Friday? And the study that I read when it was posted is being argued that it's too much time. And I'm like, who says that that's too much time? Like, they were saying it's actually less. Communication, what does good, rich communication look like in the home? And discipline. And I'm just honest, I think we get discipline wrong. Discipline in my mind is about teaching, not about punishment, and they're different. Now, I think we should be strategic and intentional in all aspects of our lives. And I do believe Christianity should be a strategic, intentional thing of how we live and how we parent. So, what is parenting? You might have heard the quote before, having children makes you no more a parent than having a piano makes you a pianist. Michael Levine, it's kind of a dumb quote. I kind of find it amusing, though. So I posted on my social media, what is the goal of parenting? And immediately, like within minutes, someone posted and said, the goal of Christian parenting is to raise godly children. Now, there's a lot of Christianese in that, so I wrote back just to say, can you clarify more of what you're meaning? Because I get, as parents, we want our kids to love Jesus. We want them, right, to become Christians. But is Christian parenting in other aspects different? If you have a 2-year-old who's not sleeping, is that a Christian parenting aspect, or is it just a do we swaddle, do we let them cry out? Is that just a parenting kind of aspect? Trophy child. Our job as parents is to raise children who love Jesus and leave home as responsible adults. I like it. We prepare them for a lifetime of following Christ, working hard, being married, and raising a family. I really like that. Most parents, and I'm talking in the hundreds, said to raise happy kids. And I would say, what does that mean? If you're not happy, like, do you not have a happy marriage then? Like, happy is an emotion. It's not a rubric of how you've actually done as a parent. And then I read a quote from that same book, Trophy Child, that stopped me in my tracks. They will not be with me forever, so I prepare them accordingly. I call these stop quotes in my life. It means I'm reading and I literally stop. Because this is the reality. Your kids will not be with you forever in the way that we're talking right now. So do you and how do you prepare them accordingly for the world they're going to be heading into? I spoke a few years ago. This is before. It's always this like 2-year abyss of COVID. So before COVID, I was at the One conference, which was the new Breakforth conference here in Edmonton. And I heard a talk by Neil and Cheryl from Family Life Canada. They talked about how we need to teach our children to live without us and with God. And I'm kind of thinking through that. It's an interesting kind of statement. So as a Christian, I look first to what does the Bible say about parenting. George Barna, who does research, says, if you've sought spiritual guidance in parenting, you might have been surprised to discover how little instruction God gives us in this regard. Now, people have written me and said, I can't believe you said the Bible says nothing about parenting. And I'm like, well, because the word parenting as a verb is 100 years old. So it's not in the Bible. Neither is the word Tesla or iPhone or many other things. It doesn't mean we can't address it, but The Bible doesn't, I mean, you think of kids in the Bible, they got married at 12 and a half to 14. Think of your 12 and a half to 14-year-old being married, right? There wasn't this delayed adolescence up until like mid-20s. Now, the Bible talks a lot about who we're to be as people. And if you become who the Bible calls you to be, I think you will probably be a good parent. And the Bible's filled with a lot of just like children. Deuteronomy talks about teach them to your children. Now, the actual language is not the word teach. It's the word inscribe, which is like carving with a knife. Proverbs 22:6. Now, here's my concern with this verse. Every single book, almost across the board from a faith-based perspective on parenting, used this. But here's how they used it. They used it as a promise. And the problem is that Proverbs are not promises. Proverbs are wisdom. It's the book of wisdom. It's a book of adages. It's not a X plus Y equals Z. There are, and I believe most parents who train up a child in the way he should go will follow that. But there's a lot of really good parents in the church world who have kids who go off. And what do? We look at them, and I've had parents say to me, people have said to me, I guess you didn't train up a child in the way you should go. And these were really good parents. Not every bad parent has like bad kids. I taught in inner city Toronto. A vast number of my kids' parents were involved in gangs. One of my girls, her father was one of the leaders of the gang. She had a 99.9% average. One day we're sitting and I said to her, hey, can I ask you a question? She said, sure. I said, how? I said, I know your life. The parents were heavily involved, if you can believe it, in their kid's life. But I said, how do you have such a great average? She just said, I'll never be my parents. And I made a decision not to be that way. So again, do I think that most good parents have good kids? Yes, but there's always, right, that parent who's still a good kid, but a kid might go off. Colossians and Exodus is very authoritarian. Children do what parents tell you. There's no relationship or anything else. And honor your father and mother. And Proverbs 13 we'll deal with a little bit later in discipline. So parenting stages, there are stages. If you have younger kids, you probably will say there's more physical exhaustion. As kids get older, you'll probably say there's more mental or emotional exhaustion. One mom just said, I'm just exhausted all the time. And I'm like, that's how some of us might feel as well. Some of you might know the pastor named Andy Stanley in the United States. This is actually his wife who made these ones at the bottom. Sandra wrote, there's 4 kind of stages: discipline, training, coaching, and friendship. And I like those. Now, don't get hung up on words, because you discipline throughout, you train throughout, you coach throughout, and you're a friend throughout. Sometimes we get these emails in the church. It's like, you're not a friend, you're a parent. It's like, well, you're probably a bit of both of those. And every kid progresses through these in different, like, it's not like a kid is 6 and the day they turn 7, there's this change in maturity. If you have kids who are involved in certain, like, especially kids who are involved in rep sports, basketball, volleyball, football, dance, gymnastics, those kinds of things, there's just certain kids who move more quickly through these things. And if you've studied ever parenting stages online, the algorithms will usually push you to parenting styles. Now, we're to be a lot of parenting styles. Of course, we want our kids to be Christians, of course. But there's a woman named Allison Schaefer. If you don't know her, I would encourage you to follow her online. Schaefer is Schafer. In Ontario, she does these weekly like Facebook Lives where you actually, if you ask a question, you get a free gift card for Tim Hortons, which is easy to get $5. But she says that you'll find there's a lot less parenting styles than names to describe them. Before I give you a few of them, I wonder if you would agree with me what we call a lot of these are paranoid parenting styles. This is what changed in the 1990s. The way we parented shifted, and there were some consequences from that. Tim Elmore, as a side note, every single book I show you tonight, I have one Amazon link at the end, which has every book link in every category. You can just take a picture of it later. Tim says, from this decade, the 90s, adults began to believe that our world was less safe than ever, and our kids needed oversight or direction at all times. It created a few things with kids. Number one, kids began feeling entitled to special perks because we said that they're special. We have a soccer club in Toronto that doesn't keep the score. And every kid gets the biggest trophy you can imagine at the end of the entire year. Do you know who keeps score, by the way? Everyone, every parent, every kid, like everyone knows the score, but we don't seem to think it's real because kids shouldn't lose is their idea. You know what happens when you lose? You learn, sometimes you don't win in life. Kids began to feel unsafe, afraid, or even paranoid because of their parents' behavior. Kids began believing that they were fragile and could not handle adversity. Kids began embracing the narrative that the world is full of evil people who could harm them. I wonder if any of you would agree. This is kind of where we're sitting today. And it's not good. So parenting styles. I began with 50. I made a YouTube video of it. You can find, I think I'm at 140 or 50 and growing. I am not going through all these. I'm going to hit a few of them and just move on. The blue are the main ones. The stars are the ones you should be. Right in the middle, of course, faith-based. Top left is one of the main conversations of the day. It's called attachment parenting. Now, if you've studied psychology or other things, you might think of attachment parenting as Dr. William Sears, breastfeeding much longer than other parents, co-sleeping, not what I'm talking about. Attachment parenting today is this, the idea that our kids need to attach to us as parents first and then go attach to their peers. The problem today is called peer attachment, where our kids are looking for unconditional love and acceptance from each other, and they can't give it to each other. Because kids are not able to do that. They don't have that unconditional love that we as parents can give them. Other authors, a woman named Tina Bryson and Dr. Dan Siegel. If you don't know someone like Dr. Dan Siegel, please follow him online. Unbelievable. They have a book called The Power of Showing Up. And in it they talk about, I don't like alliteration, but it's 4 S's. If kids feel safe, seen, and soothed, they will feel secure. And again, the idea is secure attachment, that your kids have a home base that they come back to, recharge, to then go back to life, right? And then go back to school, maybe part-time jobs or whatever it might be. Helicopter parenting, you've all heard of this one, right? It's like a helicopter, we hover and then we swoop down. The one I heard recently is even more amusing. Anyone know that term Black Hawk, like a Black Hawk military helicopter? Movie Black Hawk Down many years ago. Black Hawk parenting is where like a Black Hawk helicopter swoops down, blows everything up, and then flies away. And I'm like, I kind of find, teenagers find that one really amusing. Bulldozer, rescue, lawnmower. This is where we pave the way for our kids so their world is just perfect. There's no bumps in the road. Over-parenting, top left. The more we over-function as parents, the more our kids will under-function. If you want to remember one kind of quick line tonight, remember that. The more we over-function, the more our kids under-function. This also happens in our marriages. It happens in the workplace. When someone over-functions, the other person under-functions. I mean, I could go on all day. Look at the second from the bottom, Humpty Dumpty parenting. We're so worried our kids are going to fall off the wall and be broken and never be able to be put back together again. The top one, groundhog grandparents, is a new one I heard a couple weeks ago. It's the idea that like you're parenting and like your parent, their kids' grandparents like pop up and like this is how it was done years ago, and then they kind of pop back down, even though things might have changed. So here's an easy question. Anyone confused? You're like, just tell me what to do. Like, listen, there's only 4 parenting styles. There's only 4. Everything I just told you can be plotted on this graph. Now, you can see on this one axis is support and warmth. This is like loving your kids. And it's not that you know you love them, it's that your kids know that they are loved, right? Those are different things. Authoritarian parenting, right? Do what I tell you. I am the parent. Lots of control and demand, but not a lot of love, warmth, and support. Every study is the exact same. We're supposed to be authoritative parents. I don't know why they did authoritative and authoritarian, too similar, but authoritative, we love a lot and we ask a lot. If this was a few years ago and I was coming on the road like this, so let's say I was just at home and coming to speak to you tonight and my wife, who's a nurse, was out, I'd say to my kids, all right, walk the dog, right? Cook dinner for your mom, dishes are done, homework's done. By the way, I love you, I'll see you guys, hug, go. Right? It's both of those things. Now, the studies are very clear. Authoritative parenting is it. And the first part of that is actually the word authority. You could also use the word influence. Think back to the father whose daughter hated him, right? You can't have that type of parenting when you don't have that influence or authority in your home. As a side note, you can Google this. You'll find this. This is just basic stuff you'll find online. And if you want this, you can also, I'll send you a picture of it later. Don't overparent. It's the very simple line. The more we overparent, the more our kids will struggle. I like this. We do life with, not for. And you can break it up. We do life for, then with, and then let your kids do life. Think of it like an analogy when your kids are learning to ride a bike. Remember that? If you have younger kids, hands are on. It looks like I'm strangling a kid. I'm not. Hands are near, like they're on their shoulders. And at some point, you begin to move your hands back. So like think of like little kids, then it's like elementary kids. And by the time there's high school, there should be, like if your hands are still on your 17-year-old as they're riding a bike around town, like you're probably over-functioning. But you get that analogy. 3 quotes. Leonard says that many college faculty and staff report a noticeable fragility amongst today's students. Some describe them as teacups, beautiful but liable to break with the slightest drop. I've often heard students today called House of Cards, not that Kevin Spacey Netflix series, but the idea of if one card's pulled out, the whole house collapses. I was speaking at a Christian school a week and a bit ago, and grade 6, 7, 8s. And the word I heard from 2 of the students after was the word drowning. Brett, if one more thing happens, I'm going under. In grade 6. Tim says, overfunctioning in parenting simply means doing too much for our kids, intervening and removing common struggles they may experience in their day. When we insulate and remove common natural consequences from actions in life, we fail to prepare them for the future that awaits them as they mature. We've often heard the term that we bubble wrap our kids today. You know that bubble wrap you can pinch and make the little explosions with? It's kind of like that's how we let them live. Julie Lithcott-Hames is the admissions director for Stanford University. Here's what she says. She has an amazing TED Talk as well. Why did parenting change? From preparing our kids for life to protecting them from life. This has been the shift in parenting in the last 20 years. We've stopped preparing our kids for life, and we've begun circling the wagons around them and protecting them from the world. She actually talks about young adults she uses the term not quite fully formed humans. It's kind of a funny statement. I'm at a number of talks, and I've said this, and one lady came up to me and she said, so I'm the admissions director, and she said, I'm going to tell you the school, but you can never mention it. I'll just say it's a school with over 50,000 students in Ontario. She said, do you know that we have a program now for first years? I said, what do you mean? She goes, well, we began a number of years ago to realize that first year, not women, but guys, were desperately in trouble. I said, what do you mean? She said, well, by the end of September, some of them had blown through the entire meal plan for the whole year. It was like they're at an all-inclusive resort, and they didn't realize that, you can't just eat 7 meals a day, every time your card gets swiped. She said, we were finding from professors, they were saying, can you tell these young guys to shower? And she said, we laughed at that. And then we realized that many young guys were told to shower by mom or dad, and they had never learned that you need proper hygiene. And she said, we now have a program on the most basic things in life. How to use a bus in town. How to go get groceries. How next year to find a house, and how that will actually, even how to talk to adults. And then I've had 4 more people come and tell me that this is becoming a common thing at colleges and universities across Canada. Let's play a quick game. You might be an overparent if you. No elbowing your spouse, no looking over with one of those eyes if this is you. You might be overparenting if you drive to your kid's grade 2 class each day to cut their food into pieces at lunch. This was said by a teacher right around the corner from my house. You drive to your kid's school and walk them to the door of their classroom. So I'm a grade 8 teacher. My kids would line up, and one of my kids' mums was the same height as my kids. So I would look down, and I couldn't tell if she was there. She would always try to come up. So she would hang out with her son in the schoolyard, only mom of grade 8s. She would come upstairs. So one day, I'm heading to my door, and I see her. She is at the lockers with the kids, with her kid. And she's saying to him, it's really hot, take your coat off, honey, and she's helping him take his coat off. Grade 8. She then comes over and says, listen, I'm really concerned my son's being bullied. Can we have a meeting tonight? Yeah. And in the meeting, she said, do you know why he's being bullied? And I'm like, yeah. It's the clearest thing ever. You're the only mom that's actually here. This is actually why we instituted kiss and rides at schools many years ago. It wasn't because we want to support parents, it was because we wanted to get rid of parents. So you come up with the pylons, we're like, hi, well, good morning, your kids come out, we're like, goodbye, and then you have to drive away. I once, as a teacher, had 2 parents who were fist fighting in the schoolyard, so I pulled both of them into the office, and the principal said, what do you want me to, they're dads, they're not kids. Call the police, but this was kind of what was happening. Number 2, you send your kids to camp or retreat with 2 phones. One to give to the youth pastor or whatever, and then one so that your kids can text you proof of life at the end of the day. You go on a job interview with your child. 1 in 7 teenagers and 1 in 7 20-year-olds in North America today. Would any of you hire anyone who comes in with their mom or their dad? I just don't understand. True story, father in Chicago who calls his daughter at UCLA, California, to wake her up and to give her her agenda for the day. You think of not quite fully formed humans, and you're kind of like, that sounds more true. Now, here's the only one I get hate mail for, literally. You always make your kids lunch. So when should a kid make their own lunch? And I would say as soon as humanly possible. There's only like 8 things they can take for lunch because of allergies anyways. Put them all out on the table. Have them pull it into their backpack and zip it up. They're more likely to eat it if they pulled it into their backpack. But you're teaching your kids how to do this. I know I'm being live streamed. Hopefully my friends won't see this, but I have multiple friends of my family with multiple university, college-age kids who still lay out their clothes for them each morning, do a hot breakfast for them, and give them their lunch for the day as they leave. They're all single, as a side note. Another conversation for another day. You call your kids' teachers to argue marks. Now, there are times that you may have to go get involved, but maybe we could equip and empower our kids to go advocate for themselves if a test was marked incorrectly or something else. And the big one, as a teacher, this was every first day of school. Parents who completely just lose their mind because Johnny's not in class with his best friend. When you call the principal in hysterics because they're not together, what are you saying to your kid? You're saying, you're not strong enough on your own. You need this other person to be with you. And guess when this is all figured out? By the end of day 1. When they meet other people, they realize there's recess, the list goes on. How about when is a kid old enough to carry their own backpacks? I always just see parents who pick their kids up from busing and, kids are sent, like every dad has like 2 Dora the Explorers and a Spider-Man backpack on the way home. Over-parenting is fear-based parenting. It's the question of, well, what if? Well, what if I don't make their lunch? Well, what if? There is an interesting rhythm in our homes today. We attempt to speed up our children's early development. Let's pause there for a minute. Can I just encourage you, do not have the news on with young children in the house? I mean, the news, whatever your views of the news on, if you just want to know what's happening in Ukraine or other things, everything's bad. Like, it's not like, here's the good stuff that happened in Alberta today. It's like, what car accident happened? Who got murdered? What jail? What are judges? Like, this is what happens. How about music and media that kids listen to? I don't know if any of you are Marvel movie fans. I went to see the movie Endgame many years ago with my 15-year-old son. Phenomenal time. I was so disturbed in the movie theater because it was filled with 4, 5, and 6, not grade, year-old children. This isn't a Pixar film. This is like a high action. There were 3,500 deaths, said one blog in this film. One of my pastors is with his teenager watching this movie. In front of him is literally a little kid who can't even reach the seats. 4 years of age. He says to his dad in the middle, "Dad, I'm really scared." The dad turned to the kid and said, "Shut up while we're in the movies." Can you just see the influence just fade away? And then when kids get older, we put the brakes on them. My new phenomenon, weird one, I'm invited into churches to speak to young adults groups. And they say, "Can you please come?" Like one guy said to me, large group in Toronto, 200 young adults. He says, 0 of them are dating. So what do you mean? He goes, no one's dating. Now, is this a pushback from, and I use the term purity culture, not being pure. We know the difference between that. One is taking it too far, right? It's a little too legalistic. It's not that we're not called to be pure. But one guy said to me, I asked him, I said, "I was told none of you are dating. Why?" One guy said, "Well, my mom says, like, whoever I go for a coffee with, that will probably be who I have to marry." How do you reply to, like, what on earth? Like, if you're going for coffee, you might be saying, "What's your last name again?" Like, you don't. How about working part-time jobs? It used to be that kids all worked. And today it's less and less and less. And driving. And I love that you can get licenses in Alberta. It's 14, right? Am I correct? Like, love that. It's 16 for us. But I hear from students all the time. Now, it used to be 90% of kids get their licenses, 90 to 100. Now it's down to like 60 to 70%. 60 to 70%. You know what kids say to me? I had a 17-year-old girl. She said, "Well, Brett, we live in a big city, and, we drive a van." And I'm like, wow, I can hear your mom. I know her mom, by the way. That's why I said that. But, like, you can hear the parent. You can hear the parent's fear. When my daughter was 14, we're driving past our church, and she said, "Can I drive in the parking lot one day?" I'm like, "Yeah, now." Put on the signal, and we went. She didn't even hit the gas. We literally drove in a circle at 12 and a half, whatever, no gas, just, like, Around we went. Every time we talked about driving, we talked about what a great opportunity it is. I drive a Santa Fe, and she said once, it's big. And I'm like, yeah, you'll be fine. And she said, yeah, I will be. Isn't that interesting? Just even by my comment saying you'll be fine, she mimicked it and said, yeah, I'll do it. Like, she'll be fine. Some of you drive big vehicles. It's not like you can't do it. It's just interesting how things have kind of shifted, and there's fear today for kids and things that shouldn't be fear-based. How we parent matters. This is just kind of and this first section is the largest by far, just to let you know. Authoritative parenting. Love our kids a ton and then ask a ton. Don't overparent. If you have kids at grade 4 and above, you know what you can say to them tonight? I heard a guy talking about overparenting. If you think I'm doing too much for you, let me know. It was only recently, my wife and I are on FaceTime with my son, and he has an exam the next day, and he's like, I'm going to go to the gym tonight. And we're like, have you studied? Like I would never go to the gym the day before an exam. And he says, yeah, I have a 90 whatever % in the class. I'm fully ready. I want to go relax. And he said, stop overparenting me. And he kind of smiled. And it's like, we've said this to him for years. If we're overparenting you, let us know. Do life with our kids, not for them. And now the word coach is just a quick thought here. So I coached rep AA baseball. Loved it. But the idea of coaching is this. So I had 10 guys and 1 girl. So all winter for many seasons, I worked multiple days a week in gyms, right, hitting 1 million balls at them again and again, teaching, training. The first game we go to, though, when we get to the game, I set up everything, and I sit on a bucket, put my hands over this ledge, and they go into the game. Because I don't play it, they do. I like this thought. Your kids tomorrow go to school. They may go to jobs. They may go to things. Have you coached them and equipped them? Because you're not in that game of life for them. You are in part of it, but not all of it. And some book suggestions. We've seen Trophy Child and How to Raise an Adult. Hold On to Your Kids is phenomenal. Gordon Neufeld, if I'm correct, is from Alberta. I don't know if he still lives here, but he is an Albertan. Am I saying it right? Anyone? Yes? Albertan? Good. Karen Gordon's The Teen Years. I read this when my kids were 9 and 8, so it's an older book. It is phenomenal. And if you can't read the one on the end, it says free-range kids. Think of free-range chickens. Woman in Winnipeg a couple years ago called Child Protective Services because a grade 6 kid rode his bike home from school alone. And they opened up a case. What kind of world is happening when a grade 6 kid can't ride a bike home from school? When did you ride bikes home from school? Because I rode my bike 2.5 kilometers to and from school in grade 2. Now, when I asked my parents about it, my parents did hands-on, hands near, hands off. They didn't call it that. They rode with me for the entire month of September, back and forth. And then they actually rode well behind me, and I rode my bike. There was only a few stop signs. They wanted to make sure what I did. And then I thought I was riding on my own, and they were in a car way back watching me. But they taught me and equipped me how to do it. So many thoughts on the ideas of parenting. And I kind of leave you with that first one to think through, right, how can we be better with that? Number 2 would be the greatest gift we can give our kids is time. Now, you could also argue the greatest gift you might be able to give your kid is failure. And if you're thinking of a different conversation, of course, Jesus, right? That's kind of another conversation. We're talking more about the parenting realm. Now, the moment you have a kid, you have 936 weeks until your kid turns roughly 18. Now, the truth is, if you think of these as marbles, you have 936 marbles. Now, your kids, we kind of think of this as the end of grade 12. If you ever Google the 18th summer, it's an interesting blog post about how that 18th summer with children, and if you have a grade 12, that's an interesting transition year. But many people make marbles jars, and they literally every Sunday pull out one marble, and the marble is time that's gone. You don't get that back. That volleyball game you missed, that chance to go for a walk after school, that time to sit together as a family, go to church, go to have a meal, whatever it might be, is gone. So I used to actually bring marbles with me, and I had 3 jars, one for a baby, one for a middle schooler, and then how many weeks I had left in high school with my kids, because it was the occasions that really mattered to me. If I had if I got offered to come speak at your school tomorrow and you guys like tonight, but it was November 23rd or March 4th, and this was a number of years ago, I would say, thank you so much, but can we just move it a little bit? Because that's my kids' birthdays. And I did not travel on those days. We went and we celebrated them on those days because I don't have that opportunity anymore. They're both away, and they're both in school that day. So we've had to go on weekends on either side. I actually made the marbles analogy. Jars, I took it with me. I'm traveling down a large highway, and I got cut off by a transport truck. In that moment, I wasn't wondering, am I going to die? I'm wondering, did I put lids on the marbles jars or not? And the answer was no. Suddenly, 2,000 marbles fell at my feet. Have you ever tried to drive with thousands of marbles under your heel? Like, it was the most dangerous thing ever. Anyways, I don't travel with marbles anymore. So the math isn't perfect. But I mean, roughly when your kids get to the graduating day, unless your kids are born June 25th, when they graduate, here's what I want you to do. Dump out the marbles, and I want you to start again. As a side note, this is the most solemn moment I see in this talk, because I've seen women and men, I had a guy the other week, burst into tears because we begin to grieve. We grieve as our kids get older. My kids aren't in the home right now. Now they're back in the house for the next 4 months, but you grieve when your kids grow up. You grieve as they go into life. There's also an exciting moment in that, watching your kids excel and do well. But that's why I call this a marbles analogy with a twist. The moment they graduate grade 12, you start a new marbles jar, and every time you build into your kid, every time you take them for a walk, every time you hang out, play a game of Settlers of Catan, whatever you do as a family, every time as they get older, they have a boyfriend or girlfriend. My daughter's boyfriend's actually from Calgary. They met at camp. Every time they're over and we go for dinner, every time I FaceTime her, every time I send her an emoji that just says, love you, have a good day. Then they, in time, get married. Then you have grandkids. Every time you support and babysit and go on a vacation, every time you put a marble back in the jar. One woman said, what do I do when my marbles jar is filled again? And I'm like, oh, I love that question. And I'm like, dump it out and start all over again. Your kids are always your kids. It just changes. My parents in their late 70s. I chatted with my dad for half an hour today, driving up from Calgary. My parents both let me know every single time when I'm speaking, they're praying for me. They're praying for me tonight. It's different. It's not the same as when I was a child, but you're always going to be a parent for your kids. Time matters. Time matters in the morning. I'm more of a morning person, so in the morning I would be the one up, making sure my kids are ready for school. Do they need a bit of encouragement, quick prayer, whatever it might be. Drive time matters. If you ever been in a car with like 6 13-year-olds, it's like you don't even exist. It's like you're in a plexiglass thing at the front. They're all talking, and you're like, I'm right here. But I've had the most precious times driving with my kids, just talking. There's something about, especially for boys, not being face-to-face, but being side-by-side. And I have a YouTube video on that. Mealtime matters. I'm going to come back to that in a second. And bedtime matters for all stages. And I say except teenagers. Can we just agree, if you're tucking in a 17-year-old, you might be overparenting? Can we agree on that one? If not, come and chat with me afterwards. If you want simple ways to have great results, Columbia University has done 4 massive studies that say this: if you eat 3 dinners a week together as a family, statistics of teen pregnancy, dropping out of school, dropping out of faith, drug, alcohol, you name it, all go dramatically down. Now, for anyone who's trying to figure out what is magical about chicken, nothing. It's not about the meal. It's about what you do with the meal, right? It's not just shoving food into your mouth. It's the preparation. It's sitting down, and it's eating together once you all sit down. It's the conversations during the meal. It's technology is not just sitting looking at us. It is put on airplane mode or put away. And you play a game. Have you ever heard of Rose, Bud, Thorn? Anyone do that? Tell me something good that happened today. Rose, tell me something, Bud, what you're looking forward to. And Thorn, tell me something that really was bad today. And you as parents are involved with that. And then it's cleaning, and then it goes from there. Now, this changes as you go through high school. I talk about scheduling, the third one here. Like, when you're in elementary school and below, your kids are with you all the time. If you have really little kids, you know, like they're always with you. And then suddenly both my kids were lifeguards, and suddenly both of them are working. And if you have teens, maybe they're working at a Tim's or working somewhere at a co-op or whatever is local here. Like, suddenly they're working. My kids were working 2 days a week each, but they were different days. So suddenly we went from having family meals every night of the week to we then had my phone would ding every Sunday and say, when are you having a family night? And then it became a night where we would play a video game together. We would play a board game. We love Settlers as a family. What do you like? Like, we would go out for dinner. We would go for a walk. We'd go down to the beach near us or whatever else. Marbles analogy, as a side note, there's an app called the Parent Queue. It's free, and it actually does the marbles analogy for you. It's a good blog and podcast. Meals, scheduling, and rocks. I'm going to leave rocks for a minute. We'll come back to that one at the very end of the talk. Book suggestions for time. How about this for a great name of a book? The Grown-Up's Guide to Teenage Humans. The Power of Moments is just talking about celebrating. Like, what do you do for Christmases, birthdays, graduations, like kindergarten, grade 8, high school? We in our house use something called the family gold plate. It's actually like a cheap gold plate, but on the day when we're celebrating something, we put the gold plate out and we celebrate you, whoever you are. We go around the table. What do we love about you? What do we appreciate about you? And the book, as a side note, it's not just celebrating the good things, it's also acknowledging the pits. In grade 9, my daughter's best friend tried to take her life in the first week of school. It rocked my little girl and it rocked our family. We went out for dinner that night. Did it fix anything? No. We cried, we laughed, we were together. We got dessert. We don't usually do that as well. But it was like, let's just be together for a night. And fair play is this is a new one I've kind of added in. This is actually talking about the emotional labor of women. Now, this is an interesting conversation. When I do men's breakfast, we talk about this a lot more. Just so you know, through COVID, they say the emotional labor of women has grown like exponentially. Now, when we think of emotional labor, many men, including me until I kind of began understanding this more, think that this is division of labor. Like, in my house, I clear the snow, I fix everything. Like, there's certain things we do. Emotional labor is different. Let me give you my example. I come downstairs a year and a bit ago, and my wife says to me, there's a card on the table. It's your dad's birthday today. Sign it. The present's right there. We're going to see him for lunch today. It's my dad's birthday. I have no idea, because I don't hold that in my head, because it's my wife's emotional labor. It's something that she's just always done. So I don't know anything for his birthday. She's gotten a gift. She's gotten a card. She's booked the time. I just got to get in the car and go over. That's not okay. Because what does that teach to our children? Which is why I like this, because it is about time. You can actually, on Amazon, buy a deck of cards, and it walks through things that I never would have imagined. It's like cooking dinner. You can divide that up, but then there's also the shopping for that as well. And then there's there's just so many thoughts to go along in life. For us, we have an extra bathroom in our upstairs, and so we gave that card to our children. We're never cleaning your bathroom again. Here's your card. But we also then had to spend a lot of time teaching them how to properly clean a bathroom. And if they're teenagers, you're going to have to tell them a few times, right? It's not just like, here it is, it's yours. Time matters. Think through how you're spending time. They polled recently hundreds and hundreds of kids and asked, tell us one thing you'd want to change with your parents. You know what they said? I wish my parents would put down their phones and look me in the face. Junior high, middle school, high school, that's what they said in droves. There's always this phone in between me and my mom or me and my dad. So I have a new thing. If my kids come and ask me a question, my phone goes down. If I'm at my computer, I close it or I turn away from it. Full attention. The issue today we're having is called partial attention, where we're partially giving people attention, not literally, if I'm here for you, everything towards you, and then we go and we do whatever else. Communication. So now we're spending time with our kids. We're spending time with them. We're thinking of the different parenting styles, attachment, all this other stuff. Now the question is how are we communicating with them? Do our kids think we only love them when they get good grades? When they follow our rules? Or do they know that we love them forever and always, to quote the author Robert Munch? Do they know that? What if your relationship's a little bit fractured? So number one, it might be just saying, I'm sorry. When I don't sleep well, and I haven't slept through the night now in 10 years. I'm up every sleep cycle every night. This is actually why I'm wearing this ring, by the way. This is actually called an Aura ring. This is actually doing a sleep test on me every single night and monitors stuff. Anyways, side note. But if I have a bad night's sleep, I actually will have to I'll get up in the morning and I'm a bit frustrated, and I might just be a bit kind of harsh with my kids, and I might have to go to them and knock on their door and say, hey guys, I'm really sorry. And my kids will always say, it's okay. I appreciate that. It's not okay though. It's not okay that I take out my frustrations on you. If I'm sorry doesn't work, maybe you need to spend more time or have better communication. This idea that you get along with each of your kids the exact same way, that's not true. My son and I are sports guys. Last week, I'm traveling and my son's texting me about Tiger Woods and the Masters, and we're talking, we love sports. My daughter couldn't care less. I've spent more time coaching my son, having wings in some restaurant somewhere in a hotel as we travel. My daughter was a gymnast and a dancer. I always threaten to coach her dancing. It's a joke you can say once in life. But her and I have to work at things. So we love iced coffee. So anytime we're together, we'll get an iced coffee. When I'm on the road, like yesterday I went to Starbucks, I actually take a picture and send her a picture of what I got. And then she does the same with me. They're just things to acknowledge. I'm remembering you. I think of you. And we both love chicken shawarma. Anyone else? Like, it's one of our favorite foods. I don't know why, but it is. So we together, it's just a wrap with chicken in it if you don't know what it is. But like, we go together and we get it. And her and I watch a TV show on Netflix. Only her and I. That's it. When she's away for school for 4 weeks, I don't watch it. And her and I, we text every day. I text her a bit more than my son because my son and I connect just naturally with other things. But maybe that doesn't work. And I would say counseling. Can we make counseling normal? It should be the common, not the uncommon. You don't go for counseling just when you're like utterly broken in life. You might. And if you're broken, it's good to get counseling. I'm broken. I'm not well. I still go for counseling and I walk through things. But just make it normal. My kids have always known that they can go for counseling. And counseling doesn't mean you're going to go for like 3 sessions a week for the next 6 years. Like, you want a session or two to go talk with a counselor to walk through things other than talking to me and like their mom? Like, yeah, go. I heard this year, both of my kids actually went to, like, when you go to college, university, you get counseling built into the extraordinary fees you pay. They both went. They didn't even tell us. And I was so proud. I'm just like, good. Like, they didn't say, I'm going for counseling. They just said, I just wanted to chat with someone. My son was talking about just some things he was dealing with the first year of school. It's a lot of pressure being away, and he went and chatted with somebody. I like it. Are we actually listening to our kids? The number of times that I speak, so I'm at a Christian school 2 weeks ago, and after I finished speaking on media, we did Q&A. And the Q&A was almost entirely about mental health, which was fascinating. And the number of kids who said to me in middle school, I've told my mom, I've told my dad, I'm struggling with anxiety. I'm struggling with panic. And this is what kid after kid said. My parent just said, you'll be fine. I'll pray for you. But they said that as just a comment and never addressed it again. Of course we'll pray for our kids, but never addressed it again. And every kid said the same. They just said some quick line and then never again said it. Martin Luther King Jr., and I'm taking his quote out of context, I acknowledge that, says, there comes a time when silence is betrayal. I'm at a church. I'm doing what is my favorite thing. It's a Sunday morning service on mental health. I call it Care Sunday. I finish, I come down, and one of the musical worship leaders comes down, and you can see her hands start to shake. And as someone who's had panic attacks, like, you can see someone who's not well. And she starts to cry, and she says, Brett, I have told my dad again and again, I am living on the edge. I am not well. And every time he gives me one-word answers, and he's never asked me how I'm doing after that. As I'm chatting with her, up comes the aisle, the lead pastor. I usually, after a church service, go out with lead pastor or youth pastor, whoever else, and he says, Brett, excuse me. He was going to talk about where we're going for lunch. And then he says, oh, I'm sorry. I see you met my daughter. His daughter's just weeping. And he looked just like a deer in the headlights, like he had no idea what's going on. And I said, and I've known him for a long time, I said, do you have a few minutes? And we just sat down and we just had a conversation. Anybody remember the band REM from the mid-1990s? They have a song called Shiny Happy People. You ever wonder if that's us? It's the idea like we have Jesus and everything's great. We live in the now, but the not yet. Think through that one, right? We live in the now, but we're not in the not yet. We're not in the place where everything's great. I have 3 friends with prostate cancer right now. I have multiple friends going through other really big things. I had a friend of mine lose his 14-year-old daughter the other year. Sometimes there's really tough things. And if your kid says to you, I'm struggling, here's your response. I love you. We'll get through this together. And you might not have any idea what to do. That's okay. Go talk to a teacher. Go talk to a pastor. Go find a counselor. Go find a friend who you knows what to do. But just tell them you're here for them. And remember, you're being watched. I had a church bring me in for a Sunday morning service. You want to think of unorthodox? They wanted me to speak on pornography for their Sunday morning service. I remember kind of thinking, like, for Sunday? And they said, listen, we polled our entire congregation and asked, we're going to do 1 month of how we connect our faith, like our Sundays with our Mondays. And they said, what do you want help on? And the biggest things were mental health, and porn was one of them. So I did a awkward Sunday morning service on pornography. And I come home, I'm driving home, and I'm at a Subway for lunch, and my phone dings, and it's an 18-year-old kid, and he said, hey, I heard you speak this morning. If I ever struggle with porn, can I write you? Can we chat? I'm like, yeah, sure. I said, why wouldn't you talk to your dad? He's one of the pastors who I know at the church. And he said, Brett, this is all through email. He says, Brett, my dad got in the car, and it's me, my mom, and my 2 teenage brothers and sisters. And he says, the first thing out of his mouth was, what kind of stupid person gets addicted to pornography? And the 18-year-old wrote, my dad told me in that moment that he's not a safe person to talk to about anything ever again. Can you just see the influence? As a side note, where's the grace and the mercy for someone who's struggling with something in the church? If a girl in your kid's school or the community or your church, if a young grade 9 girl gets pregnant and your response is, you play with fire, you're going to get burnt. Like, if that's your response, what do you think happens when your daughter struggles with something? In grade 7 and 8, when my kids began going out with friends, I said to them, hey, just want to let you know, and we had huge talks on drugs and alcohol. I have multiple friends who are alcoholics, and we've talked about the consequences of life, but I just said, listen, if you ever find yourself in a place where you're uncomfortable, you can call me. Someone's driving you home, they're drunk. You're at a party and cocaine comes out. Side note, cocaine's becoming normal across this country in regular parties. We're regular kids. Like, this isn't just New York City or, like, is it East or West Vancouver in certain, like, kind of environments. It's becoming normal. So I said to my kids, you needed a ride home? And if you ever mess up and are high or drunk, I'll pick you up. And I said to my daughter in grade 9, I said, honey, I got a really awkward conversation with you. But I said, if you ever get pregnant, she said, Dad, I'm like, just listen to me. And we've had lots of conversations on what I call a biblical Christian sexual ethic, whatever you want to, like, how do we engage as Christians in this world? But I just said, listen, if you ever do, you can come and talk to me. Because I hear a lot of young girls on park benches and clinics and not knowing where to turn. I just said, listen, you can come talk to me. And my daughter burst out crying. Do your kids know that you love them forever and always? That there's never a thing in this world that could ever happen that you are not there for them to help them and journey with them? And do your kids know you love them? I say this especially to the men in the room because we love our kids, but do we express that love? Anyone ever read 5 Love Languages? I hope some of you have. Like, one of the best books I've read. I get married, I'm a few months into my marriage, and my wife says to me one day, she says, you know that I love cards? And I actually said this. I said, you know, cards are stupid. Because in my mind, cards are stupid. Me and my father, rather than spending $3 on a card at, like, Shoppers Drug Mart, we would actually buy a $3 tube of Pringles, sign it, and give it to each other. That was what we did as cards. My wife says, I love cards, and I said, they're stupid. She hands me the 5 Love Languages book, and then I realize, cards mean nothing to me, but my wife, words mean a lot to her, and I have to work hard at that because I love my wife, but I'm not good at telling her. My son, receiving gifts. Now, you might just say everyone loves receiving gifts. It's not just we all love gifts. Some of you know the musician Drake. You've heard that name. I'm assuming Drake has a clothing brand called OVO, really expensive stuff. My son one day said, I'd love one of those shirts. They're really cool. So my wife and I went to it's called a pop-up shop. It's like a shop that pops up. It's there for a little bit, and it's gone. And we bought him a shirt. It was the most expensive shirt I've ever bought in my life for a T-shirt. And on Christmas morning, he opened it up, and you could just see he looked up, and his lip quivered a little bit, and he said, you remembered? Like, we remembered because we love you, right? Like, that's what we say with that gift. It's not just we bought you a shirt. Like, he knew we listened, and we bought him something that he actually loved. If you have young kids, there's actually a version called 5 Love Languages of Children. And the idea is with children, you can do this with teens and even your spouse. Like, if you don't know, love them in each of these ways and see how they respond. And you'll learn each of us has these different kind of love languages. Main thoughts: listen to your kids. Listen 80% of the time, talk the rest. Driving, drive your kids whenever they want, love languages. And family meeting, I have a YouTube video on this. I was challenged by this Arrow program I did to have an AGFM, Annual General Family Meeting. I thought it was the dumbest thing ever, like a business meeting with my family. Kids are 8 and 7. We put an agenda on the fridge. We get to the day of the meeting, end of August, and there's nothing on the agenda. We're like, did we just tell 2 little kids there's an agenda? They don't even know what it is. We talked about everything. My wife and I had a list of things. We're going to be a Christian family. What does that mean? It means I'm going to challenge the music that comes into your life, right? It means we're not just living life the same as everyone else. We talked about everything. if we're going to go on a vacation, great. If we are, we're going to have to be really careful with our money. We're not going to go out for lunch as much, or it might be part of your Christmas or birthday gift. We talked about, do you need new shoes? Because kids kept getting bigger. Do you need anything for school? And the list went on. And then we said, anywhere in the world you want to go for dinner, we'll go. Anybody want to guess where an 8 and 7-year-old wanted to go? Just yell it out. Anybody? McDonald's. It's like we all know. We're having a horrible dinner, and I said to my wife, never again. She said, let's do it again next year. So we really explained what an agenda is. Kids are 9 and 8, I guess. And we get to the day of the meeting. It's filled top to bottom. Number 1, they want a baby brother or sister. Number 2, they want a dog. Now, I left teaching, and I went into, call this ministry. It's different financially. My wife at that point was only still working half-time. She didn't go back full-time until the kids were a bit older. And we're kind of like, listen, money's tight. If we value a vacation, we don't have a lot of money for a dog. And my son, who's 8, says, I'd give up the vacation. I'd really love a dog. These are big conversations. It's been the most precious time that I have every year with my family. We do it every August. We still do it. And we just talk about the year. No unwritten rules. We go through everything together. You see these books are beginning to repeat. He's Not Lazy by Adam Prince, quite great for parents of boys, not faith-based. I can assume we can all, as Christians, read a book that's written by a mainstream person, chew the meat, spit out the bones, right? Take in the stuff that you want, those good nuggets. And then the 5 love languages. Last section, discipline, and I love Ron Morris. He says here, discipline is about teaching children to behave properly, not punishing them for behaving badly. This is actually a shift, right? It's changing how we think. It's teaching kids how to behave, how to live, how to work. Zig Ziglar, great name as a side note, talks about connection before correction. You've heard that one before, connection before correction. Now, you're not going to read all of this. This is a quote from the book Ross Greene's Explosive Child. He just says here, let's get back to kids do well if they can. It's one of the most profound lines in one book. Kids will do well if they can. If a kid isn't doing well, it's because they've learned a maladaptive way to deal with something. They're not able to actually do it. So how do we equip them and teach them? My daughter and son aren't getting along. We ground them and send them to their rooms and let them out. If we haven't explained to them, here's how you get along better, learning won't happen. You've just done, like, we take a phone away from a kid, then we give back the phone. But where's the teaching and the learning? And the one on the right says an emphasis on values instead of rules raises kids who do the right thing when no one's looking. So what do we need? First, we need a relationship for influence. Work on your relationship with your kids. This is a busy chart. This is the one thing I want to show you here. So you have a positional influence and it goes down, and you have relational influence and it goes up. This is the word freedom. This is like 0 through 18. When you have a baby, you have 100% positional influence. I don't think I saw any babies tonight. Usually there's someone at the back doing that weird rock with the baby in their arm. But if you have a baby tonight and you're here and you're like, I don't like this Brett guy, you get your baby and you walk out. If you're here with an 18-year-old tonight and you're like, I'm leaving, your kid might say, I'll get a ride home with so-and-so. I'll see you later tonight. You don't have positional influence forever. You do. If you claim, this is my house, you do what I say, those are things that begin to fracture relationships, right? And this is where we start having kids who move out earlier and other things, but positional influence goes down. Relational influence goes up. This is 1,000 conversations on a couch. This is walking, this is talking about the church service, playing a board game together, anything we do to grow our relationship. So build an influence, build your relationship. Number 2, clear, agreed on expectations and consequences. Again, busy chart. 3 types of boundaries. Stone wall. I'm the parent, these are the rules, follow them. Stone wall, you can't get through. Wild field boundary. I'm at a talk and a father says to me, I grounded my kid because he came in late for curfew. If you have a middle school, high schooler, curfews are great questions. So I said, when's his curfew? He said, he doesn't have one. I said, pardon? Yeah, I grounded him because he's late for curfew. Great, when's his curfew? He doesn't have one. I'm like, I'm confused. And the father said, he should have known when he should have been in. I don't even know what to say. Picket fence boundaries. Rules are clear, flexible, and negotiated. So it's August summer night, one of the last summer nights of grade 8 for my son many years ago. Remember summer nights? I can't wait for those again. He says, can I be in a bit later tonight? I want to be home about 11. Is 11 okay? And we're like, what are you doing? Tells us, you're like, okay. 10 after 11, he comes in. What is it with us as adults? I am furious. I'm looking at my Apple Watch, like I'm 10-2, I'm checking, like what? Like I've literally become my dad who used to be, like, anyways, he comes in the door, I do this, and he says, I know I'm late, let me tell you why. I'm like, just let me yell at you just a little bit. He says, so we were all together, it's 10 to 11, we dispersed. He said dispersed. I'm like, I'm really proud of that. He says, we're all walking home, people keep falling off on their streets, and then it was just me. He said, it's me, and it was a girl, not a girlfriend, just a girl who's a friend, and they have to walk this really dark street to get to where we live. And she said, do you mind walking me home? It's really dark. And Ben said to me, I know you'd rather me walk her home and be home a few minutes late. And I remember taking a big breath, and I got a little teary because I almost tore into this kid for what? Doing the right thing? How much influence would I've lost that night? And what is it with us as we get older, getting angry? Some parents fail to realize that it's the job of every child to tear down their parents' fences and build their own. Do you want your kids to love Jesus because they love Jesus or because you love Jesus? Do you want your kids to come in at good times at night and get good night sleeps because they do it because you want them to or because they know getting a good night's sleep is an important thing? So my wife and I, as I'm building this talk and I'm writing this book, my kids were in grade 10 and 11, and we said, so Zoe, within 2 years, will be away at school. How do we deal with things like curfews? And my wife and I made a decision, curfews don't exist in our house anymore. Yeah, weird, but let me explain this. Before she headed off away to school, she was always someone who was going away to school. We wanted her to have that ability to kind of live like she would when she's away, but when she's at home. This idea that a grade 12 kid just suddenly learns how to do things, like what, the summer of grade 12 before they go away. So we didn't just say you don't have curfews. We just didn't tell them. But whatever time, like, hey, I'm going out tonight. What time do I have to be home? We'd say, what time do you want to be home? It was 10, 11, 12. And one day she said, 2:30. Like, what? 2? I go to bed at 10. And so I'm like, why? And she said, one of my friends is on vacation. She's coming back. We want to go for a coffee and see her pictures. And I'm like, okay. Late, but okay. And the next morning she gets up and she says, wow, I'm tired. She's like, I got to go to bed earlier. I'm like, it was too perfect that she actually did that. But the reality is that we wanted our kids to learn how to be on their own before they're actually on their own so they can fall if we're there. It's an interesting switch. It's just kind of this change. And the goal, I think, is an important one, but it's helping your kids learn when they're younger. Now, punishment versus training. Ron says, you're going to have to decide what you're all about. Are you here to give children the punishment and consequences they deserve for failure or the training and support they need for success? Here's a great line for discipline. All good discipline has a purpose to it. If you're going to discipline, the question is what? Often we do takeaway, especially with teenagers, we take away their phone. I would encourage you, from everything I read, it says this, that should be a last resort unless that is the issue. If they are bullying, if they are sexting, if they're looking at porn, whatever it might be, if it's phone-based, maybe. But phones, would any of you be happy if I took your phone away for a week right now? We know we as adults are struggling with addiction, compulsion, call it what you want. And kids have another level of that. There is this social network of what's happening in life. And so if we don't need to take it away, let's try different things. Now, I have 3 slides I'm going to put up, and it's something I struggle with every night. And here's my worry. If you have a different opinion than me on the next 3 slides, I just ask you don't let it ruin everything else we talked about tonight. You and me can have differing opinions and still be brothers and sisters in Christ. And so I want to talk about spanking. And I just want to give you some thoughts, and I just want to leave it at that. And I just say if we have differing opinions, that's okay. So I think in the blue, there are good parents who both spank and don't. I land on the don't. My wife landed on the do. Interesting for marriage. I think that yes, very quickly goes to abuse. And if you asked any counselor in Alberta, they would tell you the amount of abuse that happens for this. And not spanking can lead to no discipline, which leads to many kids being spoiled, doing whatever. That's kind of where we sit. First off, everyone who was spanked is not forever damaged. I was spanked, most of you were spanked, and not everyone who isn't spanked is spoiled. Now, as faith-based people, we look to what the Scripture says. And what's interesting to me is the disconnect between why, if we're saying we're spanking because of Proverbs 13:24, he who spares the rod hates his son. But if you talk to every Bible college that I've traveled through, almost everyone in the country, and I ask every theologian there, is this about spanking? Do you know how many have said yes? None. They all say, he who spares the rod. They say that the Bible uses the words the rod and a rod. They also often say Proverbs is not descriptive. No, it's not prescriptive, it's descriptive. I never fully understand that, but you get, like, it's wisdom, it's adages again. But the rod would be like the rod of discipline. A rod, not the baseball player from the Yankees, a rod is like when an Egyptian beats an Israelite to death. Always bad. It's a physical rod. But they never say it's about spanking. And we seem to forget, too, that children's controls at young ages are really fragile, and they're challenged by fatigue, hunger, and frustration. So if the scriptures don't say that, it does say to discipline, but maybe not spanking, then we look at is it working? They studied over 5 decades, 160,000 children. 80% of them were spanked, and then they looked at the difference between the spanked and the non-spanked kids, and they found that there were vast differences with the kids who were spanked. But the most interesting quote that I use is just an easy one. Research says that whether a child gets a punitive spanking or not is hardly ever determined by the child's behavior. It's almost always determined by how the adult's day went. And that's why children don't get spankings at 8 in the morning, they get them at 8 at night. When an adult who is tired, frustrated, and exasperated starts to hit a child. It shouldn't be about us. I just leave you with that. Whether you spank or don't, it needs to be well thought out and not done in anger, right? It just has to, very quickly it can lead to bad things on both sides. And there's many other methods, timeouts, groundings, takeaways. I love logical and natural consequences. Grade 10, my son's leaving, it's -10. He's got no coat on. Any of you got teenage boys? He's leaving. I'm like, Ben, you don't. He's at grade 10, have a good day. So he leaves. He comes in after school, the first words out of his mouth, why didn't you tell me to wear a coat? I'm like, you're in grade 10. He pauses, he smiles and says, yep. And he wore a coat every day from then on his own. I handed him that card, you're in grade 10. If you want to not wear a coat, you're more than welcome not to wear a coat. Discipline's about teaching. I think it's such a great line. It's about teaching, right? How do we teach our kids to function in whatever way they're missing? Influence, picket fence, boundaries. What I love here, too, with picket fence is that there's no unwritten rules. Let your kids know how things need to be. And punishment versus teaching, maybe we land on teaching. This looks like a horrible book. It's actually quite good. It's just a little bit older. The Explosive Child is probably one of the best. Honey, I Wrecked the Kids is by Allison Schaefer, who I mentioned. Amy Carney, her husband's an NHL player. Parent on Purpose is really great. It's hard to read these ones. Grace-Based Parenting. Grace-Based Discipline, and this is Boundaries with Kids. If you like Henry Cloud or Dr. John Townsend, probably some of the best authors I've ever read in my entire life. So we've talked about some really big foundations, and from that foundation, we then have to parent every other aspect of life. Mental health, dating, sexuality, pornography, media. I'm going to give you media very quickly and one slide for mental health, some resources, and we're done. You can't expect your kids to do anything you're not doing. So if you come home from work and the first thing you do is turn the TV on and watch 3 hours of television, then your kids might do the same. If you have your phone in front of your face day and night, then your kids might also do that. Father says to me a few summers ago, he says, Brett, I grounded my kid. He played 4 hours of Fortnite last night. Sometimes I don't know what to reply. I'm just like, what'd you do last night? And he literally says, I watched the Toronto Blue Jays game. And in my mind, I'm like, it's funny when people just answer. I said, the Toronto Blue Jays versus the Yankees game? He said, yeah. I said, the one that went to 17 innings? And that moment, he knows he's done, right? The game was 5.5 hours or some crazy amount of time. So his son played a video game on a headset with friends with some hand-eye coordination. The dad spent more than that time sitting on his butt doing what? Nothing, just watching television. But the father was angry at that. One thing I see often in the Christian church world is these emails that go around or Facebook posts, 5 apps you have to delete immediately. Can we just delete fear-based stuff? There's so much fear out there. It's not about the app. A woman says to me once, well, Brett, I guess your kids don't have Snapchat. I said, why do you think, the way you word that, it's like, I'm so enlightened as a speaker, like my kids don't have Snap. Like, I said, both my kids have Snapchat. It's the #1 app that kids in all of North America use as their communication tool. As adults, we text or we use Facebook Messenger. Kids use Snapchat. She said to me, well, can't you send naked photos on Snapchat? I'm like, yeah, but I could send you naked photos using my email app and my Photos app. And she said, why are you sending me naked photos? And I'm like, you're completely missing what I'm trying to explain to you here. It's not about the app. We use a term in school often called digital citizenship. Just like you teach your kids how to live online and offline, like we teach our kids how to behave online. Now, this is, I'm calling it a brain dump. This is just what I'm thinking through for my new talk. On the left is where we sit currently with tech. 50% of grade 12s say they're addicted to their phones and they know they're in trouble. By their own admission, and like I think it's even higher. The addiction to drugs and alcohol is skyrocketing. Again, also in the church world. I speak at Celebrate Recoveries often, and it's incredible how many people have really tough journeys. Bullying is going through the roof. Lack of social skills. Now, yes, we can talk about COVID affecting this, but one of the biggest things affecting social skills is video games. Boys and girls play video games. Girls finish playing video games and have face-to-face contact. They go for coffee, right? They do whatever together. Guys play till the last moment humanly possible before they have to do whatever else. So the new research says this: the average college-age guy cannot look a girl in the eye today. I'm like, that's a weird kind of study. So I'm at a university and I asked 1,000 university students, who thinks this is true? Every single girl in the room put up her hand. I said, who thinks it's not true? Every single guy in the room put up their hand. The problem is that guys are missing out being together, learning the cues, people nodding, like just, this is what you need to be in person. Sexting is staggering rates of 70% and growing. And this is where we talk to kids. This is a prevention conversation. Once you send a photo to someone and it's out there and they send it to all their friends, you don't get it back. This is a prevention. This is talking about what a biblical worldview of sexuality is and is not, and this would not be. We have unhealthy lifestyles, bad sleeps, diet and exercise, and loneliness. I read a stat last week. It says 47% of middle schoolers now say they're lonely. Loneliness is my struggle. It's been mine for many years. Most of my friends are now in like lead pastor positions. They're running food distribution on a ship in Malawi. Like I don't see them very often. We FaceTime. COVID's really shown me how men and women do things different. My wife would have like Zoom meetings with a bunch of friends. I did what most guys did, is we just hunkered down alone. We're different, but we're lonely. But our kids are now lonely. Here's what I need to do with my new media talk. This is what we have to switch. It's not us teaching our kids about media. It's this collaborative conversation of this is our goal. This is where our kids want to be. It's not the idea of saying you shouldn't be playing 4 hours of Fortnite. We should be saying to our kids, like, what might happen if you play 4 hours of Fortnite? And look at the things they need to do. Like purpose is what's being lost, especially with boys. Compassion and empathy is what's lost with video games. We need to teach our kids resilience, which means we got to stop over-functioning. And helicopter parenting. Think of those cheap plastic balls you get at a dollar store. If you push it in, it pops back up. That's what our kids should be. Because life's going to knock them down, right? They're going to have a death of a grandparent or a parent or a friend, or things they're going to fail a test or other things, and they need to learn resilience. They need to learn discipline and good work ethics. They need to learn how to have rich relationships. I would encourage you to have at least 5 adults speaking into the lives of your kids, beyond you. Teachers, coaches, pastors, aunts, uncles, cousins, friends. When you have friends into your home for whatever, small group or just a get-together, usually kids are down in the basement. Yes, we do find people separate, but we always start together. If you're at my house and you have a 15-year-old, I want to talk to your 15-year-old. My friends, their kids all know what I do, and we have these great, rich conversations on mental health or other things, and later on they can go downstairs. But 5 adults speaking, and then healthy body, healthy mind, healthy soul. And as a side note, we need this too, because I think some of us are struggling with some of these things. I have 9 videos online on how to have a better relationship with your phones. How many times we touch our phones a day? 2,413 on average. There's a great book by an author named James Clear. If you haven't read it, it's called Atomic Habits. Probably my favorite book in the last few years. Here's what he says. Make incremental changes. So why don't we stop touching our phone 5% less this week? We could do that. Why don't we watch 5% less videos on whatever we do? I say to kids, 5% less TikToks. And number 5 is an interesting one. If your kids actually put their phones up against like a computer while they're doing homework, a 45-minute assignment takes them 3 to 4 hours. Then you find kids start making changes because they're like, this is affecting their life. My daughter now takes her phone and throws it on the nearest chair or couch. It's always interesting because there's her phone because she said, I'm studying. And the one question I get asked a lot is how much tech time per day? First off, grace and mercy during winter months and grace and mercy during COVID. But we in our house never used an amount of time. And I know some people do. I'm just going to tell you what we did. What we did was we used the rocks analogy. Anyone heard of this before? Think of like a big vase, whatever you want to call it. In it, you have big rocks, medium rocks, and sand. The sand is social media. The sand is watching the Raptors playoff game. Like, fun stuff, but that's just sand. The rocks, the medium rocks, are kind of those little things. Might be grocery shopping, dishes, chores, other things. The big rocks are the big things in life. And I think the biggest, and that's why I kind of think the big thing there is the faith conversation, but everything else for us is, we never said to our kids, time, but we said if you're doing well in school, if you're getting daily exercise, if you're reading, and I put a dollar sign. I heard a speaker once say that it was John Maxwell, the leadership kind of guru, his parents paid them to read books. High schoolers do not want to read books. So we paid our kids $20 to read certain books. Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teenagers. My kids were like, I'll read that for $20. They didn't care about the book, they cared about the $20. But the learning, so we had them read books on dating, and a couple on faith, and a few other things, and they would read for the $20, but the learning they got from it is priceless. Family meals, face-to-face contact, part-time jobs, sports activities, and chores. If they're doing that, and they want to spend 4 hours playing Fortnite, I don't care. Because everything, like, anyone else watch football? Like, every Sunday, I'm going to watch the Bills game in the wintertime. It might take me 3 hours for that. So if you're doing the big things, I'm not worried about the other ones. I would say it's good to keep current with culture. These are just 5 ideas. The parent queue, these are things you can sign up for an email blast, and most of the time you can just delete. But if you want to walk through it, you have a few moments. So parent queue is the one with the marbles analogy. It's also a podcast and a blog. Growing Leaders is Tim Elmore. We quoted him a few times. The best, though, cpyu.org, Center for Parent and Youth Understanding.org. They have this weekly e-blast, which is like, here's the things, like, most recently I was reading, and this is where I found this out, that the biggest website in the world is no longer Google. It's now TikTok. TikTok has actually become the biggest site on planet, like, unbelievable that that's what it is. But they have things about the newest songs that are out, and, you know, if there is a really crazy video or something else that we're suddenly all talking about as a culture, it will address it. Plugged in, Focus on the Family, really great. Sometimes I switch or add to that Common Sense Media. And Axis is a great one. They have a thing called the Teen Culture Translator, translating teen speak to adult speak. So I'm doing my research for my chapter on drugs and alcohol. I'm around the kitchen table, and I said to my kids, so no one smokes anymore, right? And they're like, both of them said, almost everyone smokes. And I'm like, no one. And my daughter interrupts me, and she says, what do you think smoking is? Honestly, I got a little angry inside. I'm kind of like, this is my wheelhouse. This is what and I'm like, cigarettes. And she said, oh yeah, we're talking about weed. And my son said, yeah, we're talking about weed. And they both went like, no one smokes cigarettes anymore. And I'm like, language has changed, and I didn't even know. But the Teen Culture Translator addressed it the week after my kids said that. Media is a big conversation. As a side note, we're struggling. I think a good thing to let your kids know is that we are also struggling as adults. And all I say with this is, how can you have a better relationship with your phone? Be 5% better, and then equip and teach our kids the same. The one thing that I'm hearing and I like is this idea of on Sunday, for kids with social media, Sunday night, they're all deleted off the phones. Deleted. They're not gone, by the way. All during the work week, the school week, you do what you need to do. On Friday night, if you want to, you add them back in. It's the weekend. Then you can use that as your entertainment. During the week, you can still text and message and do those things, but you're not going to use any social media. I think it's great. And mental health, let me just give you a few slides. I think, first off, we need to realize that mental health is really varied. These ideas where we just say, well, have you tried like vitamin D? Like, many people need vitamin D, but it might not be the answer. Like, we don't know what someone's struggling with till they get assessed. And I love the body, mind, and soul analogy. And you can see it comes to kind of like a foundation. Every church I've ever attended, their motto has been, meet the physical, emotional, and spiritual needs of our communities. Your issue might be physical. Go see a doctor. Get a sleep test done. Exercise. Exercise is medicine. Have better nutrition. Nutrition is medicine. You might need medicine. Medicine is medicine. Get better sleep. Sleep's medicine. Your issue might be your unsustainable life. Go see a counselor. Learn some strategies like I have. Now, I don't say your issue might be spiritual, and just hear me out for a second with that, because it's unbelievably uncommon that the answer to mental illness, just like the answer to cancer, wouldn't be your faith. But your faith is literally the bedrock which you journey everything in life. God says you'll have trouble in this world, but he says, I'll be with you in the trouble. So your faith and building your spiritual disciplines is what we journey through those things with. And be and, not or people. It's probably a doctor and a counselor and Jesus. It's a mix of all those. There's a friend of mine, and the church was in Alberta. I won't tell you which one. His church is not and, they're or. So he was having, he had a breakdown like me. 5 months in, he's still at home. His church has said, you will not go to a doctor. You will not go to a sleep clinic. Your issue is spiritual. We will pray for you. You will get better. He's not getting better. He writes me, he actually calls me, he's now suicidal. And I'm like, what's your biggest issue? He says, sleep. I'm like, go to a sleep clinic. There's nothing spiritual about a sleep clinic. So he goes, and he said in the morning to the doctor, can you fix me? I said, literally, look him in the face. I said, can you fix me? The doctor said, yeah. He said, you have the worst sleep apnea I've ever seen in my entire career. He put him on I call them Darth Vader machines, BiPAP, CPAP machines. He's better in 1 day. Have you ever not slept and then slept? Like, all I'm saying is we don't know, so get assessed properly. And the ways we come into mental health journeys are so varied. Chronic unwellness. I've been diagnosed with Lyme disease. Is Lyme disease my issue, or is it my breakdown? Did I work too hard? For kids, is it social media? Statistics say if you spend 4 hours on social media, you have a greater chance of being depressed. And I would say maybe people who are depressed don't know what to do, so they're self-injuring by spending time on social media. Like, there's all these nuances. If we're over-parenting, proper equipping for life. And dopamine is an interesting one with tech. Every time you get, it's dopamine and oxytocin. Every time I get a like or my watch taps me, I get this like love drug, brain chemical to the brain. What is 500,000 of these hits do to a human? We don't know. Because our teenagers are the first generation to ever deal with this. And young girls today especially have the highest mental illness we've ever seen. And growing at incredible rates. I have an entire talk online called Hope for the Walking Wounded. I do have a few of my Your Story books here, but I wrote this before my breakdown, so it's good information. There's actually 5 counseling sessions built in. For people who've never been to a counselor, I asked for generic sessions just so people can understand a counselor. And my book, Reset, is my breakdown put in book form. It's my journals, and I'm not a journaler, but I was challenged to journal. Someone said to me, I've never heard a Christian's perspective on a breakdown. And there's an author named, it's Pastor Wayne Cordero, who wrote a book called Leading on Empty, where he addressed it. But other than that, I had no one to look towards. And so I wrote mine. Some of my friends and family, some of you know the name Carey Nieuwhof. Carey wrote his burnout story, and then friends and family wrote their journeys. Journeys of pain and suffering and sorrow, leading to like redemption and like moving forward. It's a free ebook. It's a buck on Amazon, but just sign up for my e-blast, and it's free. My website's just my name. BrettAllman.com. I have 1,300 blogs and articles online. I am not a blogger, I'm a curator, meaning my job, in my mind, is to equip you. And so I find the best resources, and just like, if you click blog and parenting or blog and mental health, it will just be 7 years of, here's a great TED Talk, have you seen this video? And up top is my social media. Another way to have a better relationship with your phone is to just fill your social media with good stuff. So what I do is I follow pastors, authors, thought leaders, like anyone who's talking about the issues that I want to be a better parent. I want to deal with my mental health or my exercise or my faith or spiritual disciplines. And so like if I mentioned Dr. Dan Siegel, some of you nodded, you know that name, but if you Google someone's name, they'll all have all their social media. like them, follow them on everything, so that when you get home and you open up something, it's not just dinner and dogs. Now, I have an English bulldog, so I like English bulldogs pictures, but my point is, fill it with really great stuff. And I actually have begun doing TikTok, I'm not dancing, TikTok videos for parents, because it's become such a big site that I'm now doing it. Now, here's what's funny about TikTok. TikTok is the most interesting algorithm ever. How many people are on TikTok? A few of them? It's funny, parents are always like, TikTok. TikTok's algorithm is a mirror of you. So what you pause on, what you watch. So I will actually, when I go online, I can literally see, after a bit of time, what I'm doing. Guy comes up to me after one of my talks. He says, Brett, TikTok, I've been on it for months. It just seems to be half-naked girls. I said to him, because that's what you're watching. He didn't understand. He thought that that's just what he's being served, but it's because if you get something like that and you skip through it, the algorithm says that's what they don't want and you won't get it again. I have all of my other talks online. You can go and watch. If your church or school or whoever has a thing called Right Now Media, I have courses online. You can also get them off my website. I do have a talk for men, how to be better fathers, husbands, and boyfriends. I have 130 videos on YouTube. And again, these are just simple things you can walk through and look at. And I did mention to you earlier about every book that I promote in every category on one link. And this is just this Amazon shop. It's called an Amazon Influencer Program. I do not like that term, but I like being able to promote every book. And every time I have new ones, it's just online. I've got about 4 slides left. I asked about 1,000 parents, how do you feel after this talk? And the word was overwhelmed. And I get it. There's a lot in this talk. There's a lot in this night. And to be honest, parenting's overwhelming. And there's 3 ways I want to help you decrease that. One is YouTube. How about watch one YouTube video every couple of days for the next few months? How about find one blog that will help you in one aspect once a week for the next little while? And the biggest thing that I created, and I forgot to bring one with me, is I created a book. It took me 3 years, and we just released it during COVID, but it's different. I think as I'm getting older, I've learned that when I come to a community, I'm usually there once or twice, but I'm only there for a short period of time. And so rather than making 6 books or 10 books on different topics, I wrote one, and it's 6 times bigger than any book. It's a handbook. The first 7 chapters are what we've kind of gone through tonight, and I added one thing on family discipleship. But everything else, from mental health, dating, engaging the culture, media, sex, porn, finances, education, loneliness, substance abuse, is actually something both parents and kids can read. And then it becomes a choose-your-own-adventure book. So rather than buying 10 books, you just buy one. I have some here. You can get them online. And if you're an audiobook person, which a lot of guys are, I am half done reading this. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, sitting in a room and reading my own book. Anyways. How can you help? You can pray. My prayer team prays when I post where I'm at. And so it's just a simple thing. You can follow me online. We're raising funds as every other nonprofit. There's a sheet on my desk, and at the bottom of our website, there's a link. And if you know another school, another church who could use me, let them know. 2 slides and we're done. So where do you start? Because you got to start somewhere. There's a band some of you might know called For King and Country. If you haven't heard them, phenomenal band. They actually were in Toronto the day Toronto shut down. And we were at the concert. It was one of those days I didn't even know if we should be there. I think they actually came from Edmonton, if I'm correct, the night or day before. They have a song anyways called Burn the Ships. And the line says, burn the ships and don't look back. That's the line I like. And don't look back. Don't look back at everything we've done wrong. Every one of us, including me, have done things wrong with our parenting, and we continue to. But the question is how do we look forward? I'm at a camp in Ontario called Muskoka Woods, and it said on a TV, a leader is someone who looks at the world and says it doesn't have to be this way. But here's the best line. It says, and then does something about it. How do we move forward? John Maxwell says, choose one thing. What is one thing I said tonight? And you're like, I can do that. Family meals, we can do that. Family meeting, sure, we'll do one next weekend. Choose one thing. But here's what he says, which is really hard. You only have 3 days to actually do it. Today is, what day is today? Wednesday, sorry. So it's Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. By Saturday night, he says, if you haven't made a single step forward, he said you probably won't. And if that's all these nights are, that someone comes and speaks and you come and listen, the goal is that this is a moment, that this is, just like our faith is built in moments, our parenting is built in moments, that this is a moment tonight that just gives you a nudge farther along that pathway of being better in what we do for our kids. And I would suggest you process. Think of like, those cheap plastic things you get and you throw them at the wall and some of them stick and some of them don't? What sticks for you? Because each of you are different. Remember, we're not looking for perfect parenting, right? We're doing the best we can with who we are and who our kids are. So I think the best way to process is to go for a walk. Maybe not tonight, tomorrow, go for a walk with a spouse, with a friend. A few days from now, you might figure out what that one thing is, but support each other. What a great, this is a great audience coming out for a night to hear about someone you don't know who talks about parenting, but support each other as parents from schools and churches and small groups. And I leave you with a quote that I said at the beginning of the talk. They will not be with me forever, so I prepare them accordingly. So my challenge to you is, so go prepare them accordingly. There's so much in tonight. I thank you for having me out. If you want to chat, I'll be at the back. If you have any questions, I'll chat with you tonight, but you can also email me. I answer all my own emails as well. Tomorrow, I'm not doing this with your kids. I'm doing a conversation on media, again, just really challenging kids to discern movies, music, television, looking at that biblical worldview and how to engage the world as well. So thank you so much. And we didn't really talk about how we're closing. Is someone going to close off? Yeah. Great. I'll pass it back. Thank you so much, and I'll talk to you at the back if you want to chat. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Brett. I think we can all agree that was very informative. With all of that said, whenever you take your seat, I will close with you all in prayer. We do have refreshments downstairs, and myself and Brother DeYoung here will be collecting donations at the back. Shall we pray? Lord Almighty above, we thank you for this evening. Thank you for bringing Brett Ullman here and for the information he has brought with him. Will you keep him and his family in your care and bless them according to your will? We ask that you work it in us to become more like you in our walk of life, glorifying you in all that we do. Lord, keep us safe as we depart tonight and give us a good night's rest so we can take up our task again tomorrow. Be with our loved ones near and dear to us. Give them all they stand in need of, and be with the poor, the sick, and the needy. Lord, forgive us all of our sins. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.